Good evening, everybody. I hope you are all doing well. Today is Wednesday, November 26th, the day before Thanksgiving, and I hope everybody has a wonderful, peaceful Thanksgiving. I'm very thankful to all of you for tuning in every week, especially the folks who are regulars. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate that. And even those who are new, again, I really appreciate you stopping by, and hopefully the information you get from this live stream proves valuable to you. That's why I do it, and I hope that we'll continue to do it for the foreseeable future. Okay, let us go into some of the comments here. And today we'll see how many people come today. Obviously, it's a holiday uh, week or weekend, I guess, long weekend. So if we don't have a lot of people coming today, we'll cut this a little short, but hopefully we'll still get some good questions. I already have a few right here. So let's start with Kevin. Kevin says he's had two MRIs, both saying different procedures, hearing January 6th, 3 days after you turn 60. So belated early happy birthday. Generally, an MRI is not going to talk about procedures. It may talk about a problem, whether it's a herniated disc or a bulging disc or something else, but it's not going to really talk about procedures that you would undergo. So I'm not sure what that exactly means. Oh, he says he means two different orthopedic doctors are reading it in different ways. Again, I wouldn't worry about that too much. I mean, I think that assuming that both the doctors who've read it, the radiologists who've read it, see something significant there, you may have different opinions by your doctors about whether you need surgery or whether there's additional non-surgical treatment that can be done. So I wouldn't get too worked up about the fact that the two MRIs maybe show a little bit different thing. Sometimes if you move a little bit during it, they call it motion artifact, you may not get the same diagnosis or the same observation about it. So I think that both those should be submitted. But again, you're close to 60. Obviously, it's an orthopedic issue because you've had MRIs, I presume on the back. So the grid rules are probably going to apply here. Grid 202.06, which talks about people over 55. And I'm going to tell you, I'm looking at my hearing approval rate, and I'm like, they're all getting, not all, but a high 90+% are getting approved if they're over 55. It's a really, really major factor. So if you're over 55 and you've got an orthopedic problem and you can fit within the grid rule, your chances are pretty good, because remember that the grid rule talks about being limited to a light residual functional capacity. Light is standing and walking 6 hours a day, lifting 20 pounds occasionally. That's a fairly significant amount of capacity to have. And even if you have that, you are disabled, assuming no transferable skills. And if you have pain or if you have medication side effects, that would take care of the transferable skills. So I'm seeing judges approve most of those cases. So again, I wouldn't worry too much about the fact that you have two MRIs that say sort of different things. I think at the end of the day, as long as it shows something significant that would get you to light or less in terms of your functional capacity, you'll be in pretty good shape. Okay. And Kevin also says it's going to get cold. Yes, there's a polar vortex is what they call it. I'm in Atlanta, which is in Georgia, the South. And it today was about, I don't know, 55 or so. I think tomorrow is going to be, when we wake up, around 35, and it's going to get to maybe 50 tomorrow. It's going to be kind of chilly tomorrow, sunny, but chilly tomorrow. And then it's going to kind of warm up. Normally here, we don't get a lot of cold weather until after the first of the year, but it can get into the 40s and 30s. But usually it's in the high 40s to mid 50s is pretty typical winter weather here. So hopefully that'll be what the case is. It's been actually quite warm the past week. So where you're at, it's been pleasant and certainly not dangerously cold, because that's no fun for anybody. Christina, who's one of my regulars. Hello, Christina. How are you doing? And thank you very much for tuning in. And Christina is always here to tell people to remember to share and like and subscribe, which I really appreciate. GI Jose or Joe, if the appeals council is taking a long time, I'm not so sure I buy into that. I mean, if the appeals council is um, taking a long time. It could simply be that they're busy. I just don't like to read into cases taking a long time or a short time, whether that means anything. Now, I would tell you that the appeals council, in many ways, is kind of a rubber stamp. Um, Although sometimes you have three judges on the appeals council, and they may disagree. But I wouldn't, draw any conclusions about that. Um, Whether it takes a couple of weeks or it takes 6 months, I just think it's going to depend on the particular person who is reading at the judge of the appeals council, and so I don't think it makes really a whole heck of a lot of difference, in my opinion, at least. Cynthia says, hello, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And I hope everybody's doing something nice with family. We are going to a friend of mine's house. We normally sort of do something kind of small, but this year my friend invited us over. We're taking the whole family, my son-in-law, my daughter, my granddaughter, and we're all going over there. There'll be about 20, 23 people, I think. So, it's always nice. You sit around, just kind of talk, and obviously there's a nice meal, but it's just nice to get together with friends and family. And, that's what I think makes Thanksgiving kind of a nice holiday, because it doesn't matter. It's not religious. It's just something we're just kind of celebrating. We have a lot to be thankful for. And I know with all the political division in this country, it can seem somewhat hopeless, and it can seem really unpleasant, because there's a lot of unpleasantness going around. And you read it's coming from the left and from the right, and you have just a lot of people feel marginalized and they feel angry. But when you step back, we've got it pretty good here. I mean, I will tell you, I've traveled in Europe before, not recently, but 10 years ago, and the streets are smaller, the cars are smaller, and gas is a lot more expensive. Um, it's really, we have for the most part very nice climates here. You have many cases, most of the time, you can say the freedom to get a good education and to get a good job or to start your own business. So, I think it's a pretty good system. I mean, I think the capitalist system is a lot better than anything else. I know there's a lot of these people who don't think that, but I disagree with them. I just think, you have to work hard, and you have to be diligent at what you do, and have a little luck, no question. But I think we live in a country where people shouldn't be starving, and they shouldn't be homeless. And I know that there's people that are, and that's a problem. And I think we need to work on that. But all in all, pretty good place. And having been to other places, I wouldn't trade it personally. Just my opinion. My opinion. Okay, Vincent Friedman, one of my clients. Good evening. Hope you have Thanksgiving. Thank you, Vince, in Michigan. I appreciate that very much. Yes, Afsana, thank you very much. Appreciate you tuning in every week. Thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to you. Cheryl says, have a blessed Thanksgiving. Yes, same to you, Cheryl. I hope that we all enjoy time just to sort of sit back and relax, and not think about what divides us, but think about what we have in common, that we hopefully care for one another. I think people in the United States are very charitable, and I think that you look, our purpose in life, I think, is to help others, and many for most people, I think they feel that way. So this is a time just to sort of think about the blessings we have, and if you're struggling, which many people are, think about what you can do, and what people around you that have tried to help you, and how to make next year a better year, because I think you always have to be optimistic about the year to come. I know it can be hard when you've got chronic medical conditions. And look, I think in some ways, Social Security disability, obviously it's a program most people would rather not have to deal with, because they don't want to be disabled, but it does give you a way to live with some dignity, some money coming in, which I think is really, really important. And I'm glad. One thing I'm thankful for is they didn't change the rules to make it more difficult than it already is. And I think that if you if you follow the rules, you can win. It can get you some money to live with some dignity, and hopefully get better, so you can get back in the workforce. I think most people I deal with, I would much rather be working than be on disability, but it's nice to know that it's here. And I try to do everything I can when someone hires me to get them to to the finish line. One case, as a matter of fact, a person who's comes on the live stream a good bit hired me, and we're trying to get her approved at reconsideration, and we were going back and forth. I did like a little mini brief, and we went back and forth 3 or 4 times, and we're both pretty happy with how it turned out. And hopefully we'll get some good news on that. So yeah, the system, not perfect, but it can work. And I've seen a lot of people, actually part of the reason I like this area of practice is that when you win, people, their life can be changed for the better. So I'm hoping we all see more of that. Okay, if I was bacon craft, if I stay on SSI till I'm 80, would my amount change? SSI does go up based on the cost of living. I believe. Well, actually, you know what? Let me rephrase that. I think the SSI amount does go up by cost of living, not very much. It's not a whole lot of money, but it'll go up a little bit. It won't be the exact same amount. The problem with SSI, I will tell you, is that they punish you if you try to work, and it's really, unfortunately, people get kind of trapped into poverty with SSI. Now, you don't say if you have enough credits for retirement, but hopefully you get into the Social Security retirement as opposed to SSI, where you have more options about trying to do a little part-time work. But the SSI amount does change, small amount with cost of living yearly, but not a whole lot. I think this year it's a little bit over $1,000, which $12,000 a year is not a whole lot to live on. How long does a rubber stamp take in recon? And again, I use the term rubber stamp, Cynthia, at the appeals council. It's not exactly a rubber stamp, but they give a lot of deference to what the judge found. The only time they're going to overturn it would be if the judge made a clear mistake. I'll give an example of one that we got reversed earlier, in the last month or two. Had a case where the judge found that my client's capacity for handling and fingering, this client had carpal tunnel and some neuropathy in her hands, and so handling and fingering were impacted. Things like keyboarding or writing or fine motor manipulation, using small tools. The judge found in the body of the decision that her capacity was occasional. Then she gave a question of the vocational witness, and she said, assume an individual limited to light work whose capacity for fingering and handling is frequent. And the vocational witness came up with a bunch of jobs. Well, the problem was the judge had made a finding it was occasional, but her hypothetical said frequent. That's in conflict. And the appeals council very quickly sent it back and said, no, you've got to decide. Do you mean occasional or do you mean frequently? And it can make a real difference because, especially when you get to unskilled jobs, a lot of them require people to engage in handling and fingering. And if it's occasional, that's like maybe a third of the day. Frequent is 2/3 of the day. Big difference. So that's an example of a case where the appeals council sent it back because the judge just made a mistake in that type of analysis. Another example I can give you would be a situation where the judge found that a person's knee problems, let's say their weakness in the knee because of a MCL or ACL tear, was a severe impairment. Severe, that's a term of art in the Social Security world, but it was a significant impairment, and it impacted their ability to walk and stand and climb and things like that. In the hypothetical, the knee was not mentioned at all. Back was mentioned, some depression was mentioned, some COPD, sleep apnea. The knee was not mentioned specifically. And the appeals council said, hey, you found that the knee was a severe impairment, that there were limitations on standing and walking. It did make it in the hypothetical. That's where a lot of the appeals council remands come from, is the hypothetical question the judge asks does not contain reference to all of the impairments that have been shown or have been proven. And, again, the judge has to make some decisions about those things. And sometimes the judge could say, this is not severe. And the appeals council will say, wait a minute. Severe basically means does it have any impact on their capacity for work? And, sometimes the appeals council will say, yeah, that's a severe impairment, or the person talked subjectively about pain and the judge just dismissed it, but didn't say why. Why are you dismissing pain? Well, a reason could be that the objective evidence does not show significant problem, so I'm going to discount pain, but you have to explain why. you're discounting it. That might be grounds for a remand. So a lot of times it's somewhat technical. It's somewhat just because it's sloppy by the judge or the decision writer, person who wrote it, the judge didn't catch it. And we'll get a remand on that basis. On the other hand, if the mistake was really not a big deal, again, let's go back to our example of handling and fingering. If the person, if that was let's say you had handling and fingering, which is either occasional or frequent, and then you had allegations of back pain, but the MRI showed basically a mild bulge. And the judge, identified jobs that, handling and fingering were not part of the job anyway. The appeals counsel could say it's not a material error because it wouldn't have made a difference. Even if the judge had found the person had no capacity for handling and fingering, the jobs the VE came up with, did not include that limitation at all. That's not a factor in that job. And again, there are jobs, that you don't have to engage in, or the jobs the VE came up with were all occasional handling and fingering. So it's almost like the judge gave the person the benefit of the doubt, and the fact that the judge had found you could do it frequently didn't really matter because the hypothetical was the other way around, not the way it was. Given my example, the judge found the person could do occasionally or frequently, and the hypothetical said occasionally, and there was no other real problem. That might be a situation where the judge's mistake was not really a significant factor. So you're going to look at all those kind of things, whether the mistake was material to the finding, whether it was significant enough to cause a reversal. But that's what the appeals counsel is really looking at. Okay. Lisa McIntyre sent from information to appeals from the therapist. Was told they can only view previous information, so denied. Should I go federal or new claim? Case been since 2019. My corrected info proves let's see if I see anything else here. I don't know what else you were saying. Lisa, here's my take on it is one thing you have to be very careful about when you've been appealing, and again and again and again, is what is your date last insured? Because if your date last insured is already been passed, it was in October of 2024, or it was in March of 2025, you file a new application, you can't pursue Title II SSDI. So I think you need to know that. And that would be in the decision, what your date last insured is. I think the second thing is if you're within the 60 days, have somebody look at it. I mean, there are attorneys that I work with who do federal court appeals, and I would have one of them look at it. Carl Osterhout's one, Brian Konoski's one. There's several. If you email me, ssdanswers123@gmail, I will give you the names of several people who do federal court work. Have them at least look at it. My point here is that if you can preserve an existing file and get it back to a hearing on that, you potentially get yourself awarded tens of thousands of dollars of past due benefits. If you start a new claim, the earliest you can claim would be the day after the unfavorable decision as your onset date, and you may lose lots and lots of money in past due benefits. So I would have somebody look at it. That's what I would say to do. Okay, Jenny So, recently approved. Congratulations, Jenny. What are the top things you do to make sure I don't lose my benefits continuing review? I think the biggest thing is, and what Jenny's asking is, you get approved and you're concerned about a continuing disability review. And people are very concerned. I had a gentleman email me today that I think he really doesn't have anything to worry about because of his age, but he's like, I want to talk to you because I'm concerned about it, and I'll talk to him. But so I think it is of concern. I think that, Jenny, the main thing is you want to keep going to the doctor and do everything the doctor tells you to do. You want to have an ongoing record. If there are objective tests that can be done in your type of medical problem, MRI, CT, ultrasound, cardiopulmonary function tests, things like that, make sure that you go to those tests. Again, going to the doctor is a really, really big thing. If they send you a form to fill out, whether it's an activities daily living form or just a disability report or the long form, get it back. Get it back to them quickly. Don't, if you don't get it back, then, they're going to assume that you're better. And it's not always a good assumption. So I think you definitely want to make sure you get things back. If you do try to work, be aware of the trial work period amounts and the SGA level. So you don't work beyond SGA after you use up your 9 trial work period months. I've talked about this before. If you're in trial work period, probably nothing to worry about because you have 9 months. Social Security doesn't want to discourage people from trying to work. They won't typically are not going to look to terminate you while you're in trial work. However, once you're out of trial work, you used up your 9 months, then you're into the left stage where you could get reviewed if your earnings go over SGA or substantial gainful activity on a kind of regular basis. So you need to know what the numbers are for both trial work and substantial gainful activity. A corollary to all this would be if you get part-time work and your earnings are really close to SGA. In 2025, $1,620 a month gross. 2026 will be $1,690. So let's say in 2026 you get a job and you're making $1,650 a month every month. You're below SGA, but you're so close to the SGA amount that Social Security might look at it and say, we think you're intentionally suppressing your income. So that would be something to work out for. But I think, again, go to the doctor. If you can get the doctor to update, any functional capacity forms, and the doctor be prepared to help you. I think those are really the biggest things. But going to the doctor is a big one. The few people I've worked with who have had CDRs that did not go well were the people who stopped going to the doctor. Well, it wouldn't do me any good. I couldn't afford it. Doesn't matter. You got to go. You have to have that paper trail. So I think that's a really big thing. And the other things that prompt them would be, number one, your age, which you can't control, obviously. And number two is that when a decision is made, there is a code entered. It's not public. I think you can get it under Freedom of Information. That is, it evaluates your case as either a 1 to 3 year review or a 3 to 5 year review or a 5 to 7 year review. 5 to 7 would mean it's not likely to get better. So, if you can get Social Security to tell you what you're rated as is a 1 to 3, 3 to 5, or 5 to 7, being at the 5 to 7 is a better place to be to avoid possible reviews. So that's my take on that. Okay, Lisa McIntyre, this is the person who is over 55. I think we really want to look at that date last insured, though. That'd be really important. Okay, this is a very good question. The high approval, I mentioned that a lot of my clients who are over 55 with orthopedic issues are getting approved. They should be approved at initial. I think the reason they're not, there are a couple of reasons. One is that at initial, Social Security adjudicators are looking a lot to see if the person's at listing level. The listing for musculoskeletal, listing 1, very, very hard to meet. So I think that if you're looking for a listing, it's going to be hard to meet. That's number one. Number two is the grid rules. It can depend a lot on when the grid rules are being applied. And I'll give you an example. And I've dealt with this in a brief I wrote today. There is in Social Security something called a 5-year look back for past relevant work. In other words, if you are at a hearing in 2025, then in December of 2025, and you last worked in March of 2020, it's been more than 5 years since you worked. For Social Security purposes, there is no past relevant work. So for the grid rules, you don't have to prove that you can't do your past work because there was no past work, if that makes any sense. So again, if it's been more than 5 years since you worked, assuming your date last insured is in the future, and don't worry about that part of it, but let's say you haven't worked in 5 years, then there's no past relevant work. Well, that changes the grid calculation because when the state agency was looking at it, 2 years ago, you were within the 5-year period of time. And so they looked at past work, and a lot of times they deny people on the grounds they could return to their past relevant work. So, in fact, I had a case I was working on today where the state agency originally approved my client um, under the grid rule. Basically said he couldn't return to past work. He's limited to sedentary. He's over 55. He meets the grid. Then quality assurance steps in and says, no, we think he could return to past relevant work. Well, now at the hearing stage, it's been more than 5 years. So I'm saying, okay, we'll get back to the original. There's no way he could return to his past job because there is no past job. There's no past work. So when the grid rules are applied, it's going to depend on, the stage of the case is in. If it's, 6 months in or 8 months in, the 5-year look back may show jobs. At 2 years plus with a hearing, there may be no jobs. So that's another reason why a case wouldn't be approved at initial. I think another reason is that some adjudicators don't really understand exactly how the grids work, how to figure out whether somebody can do past relevant work, how to evaluate transferable skills. It's not real intuitive. And so, you'll see mistakes that the adjudicators will make in that regard. So that's another reason. But it comes down to, in my opinion, that at the state agency level, initial recon, they're primarily looking for listing level impairments. They will find the grids if you make that argument or if they understand them, but a lot of times they don't. It's just easier to deny it and send it on. But I've seen a couple of situations where the past relevant work, factor became really important because by the time of the hearing, there was no past relevant work, but at adjudication there was. And that in the 5-step sequential evaluation process, step 4, can you return to past relevant work, was triggered at the state agency, but not at the hearing. Cynthia says, thank you and your team for all the work. Thank you very much, Cynthia. I will definitely pass it along. Hey, Jennifer, how are you doing? Looking forward to talking to you. Yes, we have our hearing coming up. I was actually working on your case today, which I had a little free time today. Actually took my granddaughter to a farm, had to run around some animals, and we took her back to the office, and she took her nap. And so while she was napping, I was working on a bunch of cases coming up, and Jennifer's happened to be one of them. So I was looking at your file today. We'll keep working on it. We will talk soon, in just a very few days. Let's see. Brick Nurk. Jay, I don't know what that means. My husband's claim was granted an appeal on Friday from indebted. This channel lawyer, Lisa Palmer, a good friend of mine, very good lawyer. Great. So I'm glad that you got in Lisa's hands. That's excellent. She's very, very good at what she does. There are a few people I've become really good friends with over the years that I refer cases to if I'm really busy, and Lisa's one of them. She's great. She's in Oklahoma, and I'm glad that it worked out for you, but that's great. And so I'll let her know that one of her clients is thankful for her, and she will, I'm sure, be very appreciative of that. We are thankful for you because, if it wasn't for our clients, there would be no law firm, there would be no practice. So I'm very thankful to my clients. Okay. East Kentucky 23 Wildlife. Okay. You've had epidurals, no surgeries needed. 40 credits, which are 39. I've been turned down one of my chances. The 39 is the problem. I think that, you are not a surgical candidate. Epidurals obviously suggest there's a problem there, but you're not surgical in nature. You're 39. And just to be straight with you, those are really hard to win because judges look at people who are 39 and they're saying, okay, you need something going on with your back, but this is not surgical, so we're going to call this mild to moderate. And we think that there are entry-level sit-down jobs that you could do with mild to moderate back pain. And so I think it's going to be an uphill battle, unfortunately. And unless you draw a judge who's more open to it, some judges, very high approval rates, are going to be more open to it. But I would say judges with low approval rates or kind of average are probably going to be real. It's going to be real difficult to win with those facts at 39, unfortunately. I wish I could tell you differently. Lisa McIntyre, like buttons. Yes, there you go. Hit that like button. Much appreciated. Vincent says in Michigan, he's expecting 24 to 30 inches of snow, 30 to 45 mile per hour winds. Fun stuff. What are you doing in Michigan, man? Go to Florida. Go to Texas. Go someplace else. I mean, it's just too darn cold. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm from the South, so my blood is thin. And snow, we get it once a year, once every couple of years, and it's very exciting for the 6 hours before it melts. But I don't think 24 inches of snow would be something I would be all that thrilled about. Maybe the first snow of the year is kind of nice, but after that, I think it just gets really, really old. But you can have the cold weather, man. Not for me. Not for me at all. But stay warm. And I think that, folks up there know more about how to drive in the cold and the snow and the ice. They know about how to dress appropriately, how to protect themselves, when they're going places. But not for me, not for me, but enjoy. Although as we all know, as Vince knows, I was in Michigan this summer for a wedding. Very pretty. It was really nice. And, Moomer's, he told me about Moomer's ice cream, got some Moomer's ice cream, which was very good. And, so during the summertime, it's fine, but not in the winter. All right, Jennifer, happy Thanksgiving. Okay, I think we already talked about that. And we will talk on the 16th. Jeff Brown says, hello. Hello, Jeff Brown. Bacon Craft, you would lose money. I'm not sure if I remember what was the issue there. SSI until 80. So I think what Bacon Craft said is, going to stay in SSI until 80. And I think what Bella Italian is saying is that you lose money. It's better off to go to Social Security retirement than to stay on SSI. Pricey Joe, I'm tired of tropical Texas Halloweens and Thanksgivings, but much gratitude this year. Okay, I get it. I think that having 4 seasons is kind of nice. My wife's family my wife grew up in the Miami area, Kendall, South Miami. And when her grandparents were alive, we would go down there many times, in the winter, Christmas break. And it was kind of weird. You'd see these yards. I remember this, we'd pass the same yard every year. It was just chock full of, reindeer and Santa Claus and snowmen. And it's like, 85 degrees out. And this yard looks like it's, it wasn't fake snow, but it just it was the season. And so my wife comments, she goes, one of the things about living in Florida is you don't get 4 seasons. So you don't really, it just, you just don't feel the spirit, I guess. So, okay. I guess so, but I hear you. But, my feeling, if I want to go to see snow, I'll go visit Vince up in Michigan and hang out with him for a couple of days where it's 30 inches of snow and probably cure me of that. Maureen says, good evening and all. Happy Thanksgiving. Very good. Everybody's in a good Thanksgiving mood. Shub, I think, who we've discussed various football rivalries here. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Appreciate it. And it's not it's Ginsberg. It's not just Jonathan's fine. I'm not real formal. Not real formal. Actually, there is. You said Jonathan. You said Ginsberg. There's a fellow that I know who is named Jonathan Ginsberg. His dad was actually a principal at the school my kid went to, and so there's a family, the Ginsberg family. Maybe we're related if you go way, way back. But there's another Jonathan Ginsberg. And it's just kind of funny that I think it's around my daughter's age, which is kind of funny. But, they're out there. So there was actually a Jonathan Ginsberg I went to Tulane back many, many years ago. And there was another Jonathan Ginsberg there from New York. And we met one time. And there's actually, I probably have told this story before. I'm sure I have, but I'll tell it again because some of you, it's my live stream. I can do what I want, but some of you may not have heard it. Again, I went to Tulane University in New Orleans, and when I went there, and up until recently, they have a stadium. They played their football games in the Superdome, Louisiana Superdome. Now they have their own stadium, and the team's actually doing okay. But for many, many years when I was there, and really up until about maybe 5 years ago, Conference USA, not a very good team. They would finish 500, below 500, whatever. So about 15 years ago, my son decided he was going to go to Tulane. He went there for a year, then transferred. But when he went there the first year, we go down there for Parents Weekend, happened to be homecoming. And I'm walking, went to the football game, walking the Superdome. And as I'm walking in, I hear the loudspeaker say, now entering the game for Tulane, number 73, Jonathan Ginsberg. I'm like, wow, what is that? And so it turns out that the kicker for Tulane back 15 years ago was a guy named Jonathan Ginsberg. He was from Lafayette, Louisiana. And we actually ran into him and his family at dinner that night. And we were kind of joking about, I think he's a stockbroker now in Louisiana. He spelled it Ginsburgh. So I think it's, different spelling. But, so my claim to fame is that the Super Dub announcer announced me entering a football game, a college football game, which I can promise you never would have otherwise happened because I was never much of a football player. But anyway, so that's my my Thanksgiving or my Ginsberg story, my Jonathan Ginsberg story. Okay, Pricey Joy. Whenever there's a cost of living, Medicare goes up more than eats up the cola. That said, extremely grateful time to try to get my life together. I hear you. Yeah, Medicare. I understand it's going to be going up again, and they give you a cost of living, then they increase Medicare, which I believe is means tested based on your income or whatever. So, but yeah, it's no free lunches in life, not at all. Andrea says, I'm hoping the system works and appreciate the help. Love to just have the financial breathing room to get better work again. Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way. It's just having the time to focus on getting better, not having that pressure of really, really, serious financial need on you. I think all those things make you in a better position to get better. And that if you could find something you could do, they give you a way to try it out. If you can make it work, then that's great. That's a win-win for everybody. In fact, when I tell my clients in a pre-hearing, I say, look, tell the judge you'd much rather be working, that you don't see this as a permanent finding. You see this as something you need right now because you want to get better and you need the breathing room to get better. And I think if judges sense that you're not invested in the idea of being disabled, it can really go a long way to making your credibility go up. Happy Thanksgiving, says Steve, 5632. Happy Thanksgiving to you. MD77SA, SA has been here many times before. Once the assigned examiner starts gathering records, whichever time frame for his decisions, I think that, there's a couple of things going on here is that when cases are originally open, you contact Social Security, I want to file a disability claim. It goes to the federal government. I forget what they call those people, but the field office personnel, and they actually take the case in and open the file. Then it goes to an adjudicator in the state where you live. But before it goes there, it goes into what is called a staging area, where it's kind of like in limbo. And if the adjudicators are really, really busy, they only have a certain amount of files they're allowed. I believe probably they're allowed to have open on their desk at any one time. And like, for example, in Texas, the staging can be 13 months. So it stays in staging until it goes to the adjudicator. And the adjudicator will then, and I'm telling you this because we had interviewed an adjudicator, look for my interview of Linda, who's actually no longer with the agency. She emailed me today because I'd emailed her. I saw it on LinkedIn. She had moved. So she's now working in private industry for an insurance company. But what she's telling me is that the adjudicators, when they get the file, first thing they do is they go ahead and request medical records, or within a week or two. They request medical records based on what's in the file, the medical evidence that you've identified as being within the file. They typically calendar to get that back within 2 to 3 months because they know that getting medical records can take that long. And as things start to filter in, they start putting it together as part of a file. And they typically have a sort of a deadline that they have to have medical records in by, which again may be 2 or 3 months. And if there's something missing that is significant, they'll send out a second round of requests for medical information using the 827 medical release as to authorize them to get the information they're asking for. They'll again diary that for 2 or 3 months. So, you figure maybe a couple of months, at the field office level, then it may be another, 4 to 8 months at the state agency level. So now we're at 9 or 10 months already, that's pretty typical for reconsideration. If it gets into the staging area longer, we could be at a year and a half at reconsideration. So that's kind of what's going on. So that's the average time frame in my experience, at least. Andrea says, happy Thanksgiving. Very good. Canova Henry Canova, I'm guessing, got approved by recon, but my onset isn't right. My lawyer is appealing it. They said for September of 25, but disabled in 24. Yeah, that could mean, it could be well over a year of past due benefits. That could be, if you're $2,000 a month, then you might be looking at $25,000. It can be worth appealing. So absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just Dwight. Just filed 3 weeks ago, 59, 16 January. That helps. Pulmonary fibrosis, emphysema, something in the bronchial system, pulmonary hypertension, sleep apnea. What are your chances? Again, you don't want a diagnosis, but with all those problems and you're 59, with just listening to your list of diagnoses, I think you got a good argument. Again, it's going to depend on what, how bad is emphysema? How bad is the hypertension? How bad is the fibrosis? How bad is your breathing? Can you be limited to light work? Do you have no transferable skills? But generally speaking, that profile, if somebody sent me that profile in an email and said, what do you think? I would say, I would take that case. That sounds pretty good to me. Okay. So what are the next plan for wait for the decision? So you've got approved at reconsideration. You are now appealing that. And that appeal would be to typically go to a hearing, which will be 5 to 7 months. So you won't wait that long for the hearing. That's one place it gets a little quicker. Steve received a letter yesterday called Early Acquiescence Ruling. Sent me with SSA, 61 but denied 2 times. What's this about? Acquiescence rulings are where Social Security has agreed with certain findings of the court. So let's say there's a district court decision. It could be any place. It could be I'm in the 11th Circuit, it could be the 5th Circuit, the 2nd Circuit, 9th Circuit, whatever. Social Security sees that. And technically, that decision, let's say, again, I'm in the 11th Circuit in Georgia. So let's say that, a case of mine goes to district court, federal district court, and I win because the federal court says, this is how we interpret XYZ. It's not technically not binding on the other circuits, right? It's only binding on the 11th Circuit because the 9th Circuit in California may have a very different approach than what the 11th Circuit is. It's not, I would say that it's about 10% of the time there are differences in the way they look at things. Well, an acquiescence ruling is basically the Social Security says, we got this decision. We've agreed that this is going to become our policy nationwide. So I think what's happened here is that you were approved. Apparently, there was some, whether it's an appeals council or more likely a district court decision that was on point with your case in your circuit. And so Social Security basically said, we're going to take that decision. We're going to make it broadly applicable to everybody. So when you were approved, it must have been this decision came down fairly recently. They're going to say, based on this acquiescence ruling, we're going to go ahead and approve. And that's really all that's doing. It's just citing where they're getting that from. But it's typically an acquiescence is when they're not going to fight it because they just think it's good. It's more sound policy. I'm a godsend. Well, I don't know if I'd go that far. Look, I mean, there's a lot about Social Security disability I don't know. I've done it for a long time. I know, I think I know what it takes to win a case. I'm always learning something. Look, there was something I learned just the other day, and I had not really, it didn't come up that much, but I hadn't really thought about it. And that is, there is a regulation that says if you work someplace, I think it's 30 years, I think it's some sort of labor, then that is a presumption, that will work in your favor for disability, working someplace for a really long time. The presumption would be that it's unlikely to be able to adjust to something else. You've been in any job for 30 years. I've been a lawyer for 35 years. Could I find something else to do? Could I be a computer programmer, you know, AI prompter? Yeah, maybe, but it would be hard at this point in my life to start over again. And I think that's what this rule. Well, I never, this is a ruling. I had never even thought about it. I hadn't really heard about it. So now I have what I do is I have like a little packet of information that when I prepare for a hearing, I do a hearing, kind of little cheat sheet notes where I can refer to all these things. That's now on that. Doesn't happen very often, but if I have a person who's been at the job for 30 years, I think it's 30 years, um, I'll pull out that reference and say, hey, this person deserves this benefit of the doubt. Another one, which, I use a lot would be the transferable skills analysis. If you are over 55 and limited to sedentary work, um, you know, then the presumption is that there's no transferable skills, or that you would have what they call minimal. You would need a minimal vocational adjustment. In other words, it would be really hard to transfer to something else. If you're 60 years old, limited to light work, again, the minimal vocational adjustment standard applies. I've used that in hearing, in briefs, and hearing decisions. That's something that, again, it's just part of my preparation. I always look at those kind of things. So, there's a number of things like that, but, I'm learning all the time because, new things come down and, or things I wasn't aware of that now apply. If you can use it, that's great. So, I think within this live stream community, hopefully we learn from each other. And as you know, I'll have guests on. I've had my friend Stephanie on several times. I had Spencer Bishens on, used to work for Social Security. I've had an adjudicator, Linda, on. I've had the vocational witnesses on, medical experts on. I always kind of learn, how to be better at what I do. And that's, a lot of them know more than me about certain things. So I'm going to ask them. Thank you, Corlil. I appreciate that very much. Okay. When was your DLI be and how long before it expires? It's going to, Natasha ask about the date last insured. It's going to depend on your unique circumstances. It's basically your insurance credits run out. You have to have 40 credits in the past 20 quarters, or five out of 10 years. Basically, if you work for 5 out of 10 years, last 10 years, you should be insured. But what it really means is if you stop working, you're working full time, and you stop, your insurance credits will most likely follow you for about 5 years. So we're in 2025. If you stop working in December of 25, pardon me, your DLI would probably be sometime in 2030. But it's going to be unique to each person. But if you haven't worked in 15 years, your DLI ran a long time ago. So generally speaking, after you stop working full time, you'll be insured for another 5 years. The number itself, the date, it's quarterly. It's going to either be, the March 31st, June 31st, I think September 30th, or December 31st. So it's only on the quarter. But you'll see in the file, the date last insured is, March 31st of 2028 or something like that. But yeah, it's important to know that because you want to make sure your onset date is before the date last insured. And if you're thinking about amending the onset date, if Social Security amends it, during the evaluation process, you need to be aware of that, because if they amend it to after your date last insured, you're not insured anymore. So you may win approval, but you're not going to get any money. So it's that's what they call a Pyrrhic victory. So you need to know that date, but you could call them and ask them. Or if you look at your file, it's going to be in there as well. Dimple says hello from Ohio. Hello, Dimple Bellamy. Hope you're doing well. Jenny, Angela. Okay, good. I will definitely tell Angela that. Angela is a call screener in my office. So I'm glad she was able to help you with that. That's great. Okay, Southeast Michigan. Oh, okay. That's 250 miles north in Southeast Michigan, a couple inches. Oh, I see. So you're saying that the 34 inches or whatever was in northern Michigan. You're in Southeast Michigan, you're getting a couple inches and some wind. So you're not getting the really ridiculous snow, but it's still going to snow. Hey, it's still snowing. And I'm, here this weekend, it's going to be like 65 degrees. So still too cold for me. But I'm glad that you are not getting 35 inches of snow. That's not fun. 4 o'clock lover. I'm not going to ask about where that came from, but okay. I grew up in cold states, so I was teenage living in Oregon. Oregon. I guess it's the northwest, so I guess it does get kind of cold there. I know my first cousin lives in Spokane, and every year he sends pictures of, and sometimes it's in March or even April. Very thick snow. So I guess they get it up there as well. What is the email again? Just SSD answers, SSD answers 123@gmail.com. That is my direct Social Security email. I've got a bunch of them, but that's the one I keep about 3 or 4 emails open right now. But I have one that kind of is for my overall firm one. I've got SSD answers 123 is my Social Security one. Okay, onset date. That's the date you say you became disabled. So it typically is the last day you worked or the day after the last day you worked. So if you stop working in, I don't know, November 12th of 2024, your earliest onset could be November 13th of 2024. So it's the date you claim you stopped, you lost the capacity to engage in substantial gainful activity. Dimple says, be happy to see pictures of snow, but Ohio can have 4 seasons in 1 month. I've never been to Ohio. Well, let me take that back. I was in Cleveland one time, I think, or I'm sorry, Cincinnati for a convention one time. But I'd like to go to Cleveland and see the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and a lot of interesting things to do. Ohio is a big state. I didn't realize how big of a state it is, and obviously very important electorally. Dimple, where do you live? I'm curious as to where you live in Ohio. Pit Bullwinkle, Ohio can have 5 seasons. Okay. Yeah, look, we've had that here in Georgia, where in Atlanta, where you wake up in the morning and it will be 70 degrees, and the cold front comes through, and by 6 o'clock it's 35. So I've seen a shift of 40 degrees in one day. It doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen. So yeah, I mean, look, I happen to think that having 4 seasons is kind of nice. It's just like I said, I'm not a big fan of cold weather, but it does kill the mosquitoes, and sometimes taking a nice walk in the crisp air is nice. I don't like rainy. I can handle heat or cold. I'm not a big fan of wet weather, wet cold weather in particular. But if it's sunny out, you can layer up. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. I've got one of these. I actually have a vest, which I use for tennis, and I have a jacket that's got a little battery in it, and it's got it's a heated jacket or a heated vest. So it looks like a little battery. It's, about, I don't know, it's not very big. It's like what you'd find in a camera, let's say. And, you connect it into your jacket. It goes into like a little pocket in the side, and you hit a little button, and you can have low, medium, or high. And I'll tell you, like when I play tennis, it'll be 45 degrees. I'll be wearing my heated vest, put that sucker on, where it's warms you up, and, it's fine. Play tennis in 45-degree weather. And I've got a jacket, same sort of thing. It's much lighter than the big heavy jackets because it's electric. Like, if you guys remember the day you had electric blankets. So, you just put it on, and it warms you up, and, usually it will last 4 or 5 hours at least. If you've taken a walk or something, it's really, really pretty nice. So, and they're relatively cheap. They're not that expensive either. Okay. Okay. And then we've got Medicare will be $205 next year. That's what I heard, is going to be over $200. Okay. Jeff Brown. How strong is an order for a fusion, anterior, I guess it's cervical disc fusion? I have to undergo the surgery. I have severe osteoporosis, bone loss. Talked to my wife earlier this week about possibly taking my workers' comp case, throwing the idea of getting what I can get out of workers' comp and applying for SSD. Here, serious back injuries from a June accident. Couple of comments would be, is osteoporosis a work injury? I mean, now again, I don't want to get into workers' comp here. You've got to have an injury that arose out of the course of your employment. It arose in and out of the course of your employment. So if you had, osteoporosis and you broke a bone, doesn't disqualify you. It's just you're sort of at a pre-existing weakness of the bones, and then you got your hurt at work, and they're going to be liable for that. So yes, but there's also the reporting requirement. I think in Georgia you have a month to report it. So you got to make sure you cover that. Then you get to the question of the Medicare set aside, because what you find in workers' comp, and this is not true every place, but it's true in a lot of places. If, let's say, you are thinking about settling your workers' compensation case, most of the settlement documents will say something in there that you agree not to file for Social Security for 30 months. They don't want Medicare picking up, medical costs that arose from an on-the-job injury. So, and then if you file for Social Security while your case is pending, there will be no money when you're getting a workers' comp that offsets Social Security usually, unless you have a very low workers' comp rate. And then, when you settle the case, you could then pursue Social Security disability, but you need to make sure you have language in your settlement called Hartman language that essentially says that your settlement lump sum is going to be treated like it's payable out over your expected lifespan. So if you get you can see it gets very complicated. You get all those ducks in a row, you could try to, get a settlement out of workers' comp and file for Social Security disability, wait the required amount of time, and then, collect on that. So you certainly could try to do that. Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, be well, and everybody. Yes, absolutely. Annie Davis, sure, my pleasure, Annie. Zippy 61, happy Thanksgiving. Yes. 4 o'clock Lover 38. Can a doctor's office charge you for sending records? I mean, I think that if Social Security requests them, Social Security can say, we'll pay $20. I don't think they can turn around and charge you. Every state has its rules about medical record costs and disclosure of those costs. I think a lot of them are, some states, I wouldn't say a lot, but some states say if you're requesting medical records for the purpose of applying for disability or continuing with a disability application, there's no fee. So you might want to look to see, or go to ChatGPT and ask, what is the cost? What would Social Security have to pay for my records? What is the cost? Medical records. Is there a limit on it? Can they include, mental health? There's a lot of different things that go on there. But I would say that they can't after the fact charge you if they've already sent them to Social Security. That would seem like kind of dirty pool. I'm working on workers' comp summit. Do you know what Claimify is? It's not a release. I do not know what claim. There was one system that I ran to one time where it was kind of like an electronic negotiation system. You tell me if this is what I'm talking about makes sense to you, where you'd have two sides and they would be like not in the same place, and you would put in, this is my settlement offer, or this is what I think the case ought to settle for, $75,000. The insurance company on the other side puts in their system what they're willing to pay, $15,000. The system comes back and says, you need to go down, you need to go up. And, over the course of, several hours, in theory, the claimant gets to a point where, okay, now I'm willing to take $37,500, and the employer is willing to pay $37,500, you get a settlement. If that's what you're talking about, I'm familiar with that. I've seen it. I've never really used it, but that's I'm guessing that's what you're talking about. As far as the release, I just don't know what it is. Now, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, which I tend to do sometimes, but again, my live stream, I can do it. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about AI, and one of them, or several I've listened to actually, talk about that AI is reaching a point where it will have enough knowledge to be applicable in general situations. I'm going to kind of keep an eye on my Instagram here because it's going to go off in a minute because we only get an hour. I'm going to go back on here. Anyway, but talking about AI, and there's going to come a point where, information that it has in the AI engine is going to be as much as what a human being could possibly know. And so let's take Social Security as an example. What we're doing really, if you think about it, is there are rules. Social Security has rules, the grid rules, residual functional capacity, and all those concepts of, do you have the residual functional capacity to perform any job reliably? That can all be reduced down to a set of rules. And, it's a very complex set of rules because, lots and lots of different scenarios. But if you have a database of, 1 million, 2 million, 10 million cases, you could, derive from that. You could throw out the extremes and derive from that kind of answer, or I guess now a knowledge base of what it takes to win. And then you have the data points of a claimant, somebody who's my client, and really what AI would do is just apply my client's data point to this knowledge universe and make a decision. So, if we were talking not in 2025, we were talking about this in 2045, 20 years from now, I would be willing to bet you that there will be a AI tool that will be making decisions about Social Security. There may still be a situation where you could appeal that on the grounds that your situation is truly unique and maybe go in front of a judge. But, rather than having, 1,000 judges, there may be 10 judges, 15 judges, rather than there being, I don't know how many lawyers that do Social Security disability, let's say 7 or 8,000 in the country, there may be, 200. So you can sort of see where AI could take over a lot of legal things. And again, one of the legal things it would take over would be something like what I do here, because I just think that, there is, it's data points and rules. And, at some point you may not need judges or vocational witnesses or lawyers for that matter. I'll be hopefully long retired at that point. But, that's when you see these tools, Michael mentions Claimify, but there are other tools out there that might do the same, it might be an AI tool for this. So anyway, just be aware of that. And I think that, what I'm reading is that this point of no return, this point where AI picks up the capacity of a human being, many experts feel it's going to be in the next 5 years. There's a term for it. I think it's AGI or something like that. I don't remember what it is, but that it's going to get to a point where, we're not going to be, human beings will not be as needed for various types of jobs. And there are a lot of jobs that AI can do that, you wouldn't necessarily need a human for. And you've already seen it even in a small way, LegalZoom. If you need a simple will, you go to LegalZoom. And, for $35, you need to pay a lawyer $200 for it. So certain very low cost legal matters are no longer, viable practice areas. So we'll see. Outlaw Nation. I could use my help on SSDI. Well, if you want to fill out a case eval, go to bit.ly. You see the link below, contact Jonathan 3 or above, depending if you're watching this on mobile or not. Contact Jonathan 3, bit.ly, contact Jonathan 3. And let's take a look at it. I'll let you know what I think. Does SSI KU Thunder give much thought? I'm curious as to why we're not. I don't know what's going on here, but okay. For some reason, the Instagram seems to still be working, although it should go off after an hour, but maybe they changed the rules. I don't know. Does SSI give much thought or previous denial when they consider a second application? Now 55 years old, grid rule change in the future. Okay. Um, I don't think so. Well, I mean, it's part of the record, but realize your onset date would be after, the previous denial, the hearing decision on the previous denial. That's what you're talking about. So if you went to a hearing and lost, and your denial notice was dated June 15th, 2024, or 25 rather, the earliest onset day you can would be June 15th or 16th, the day after would be the earliest onset date. So, they're only going to be looking really at information that relates to your claim as of the new onset date. They can look at the old one and say nothing has changed, and that can be used to deny you. But generally speaking, it's a new case. It's a completely new case. You're 55-year-olds now, which is good. That can help you meet the grids. And then is a grid rule change? That was something they were talking about, and they've tabled that. So for right now, the answer is no. Can't speak to what's going to happen in the future, but right now, no. Outlaw Nation, I was approved for wrongfully working. I was approved, but maybe you got terminated because they said you were working, having a hard time. I'm not sure if I quite understand, Outlaw, what you're saying. I think that seems to be what you're saying. They said you were working when you were not. And, when that happens, what you really have to do, as crazy as it may sound, is, get statements from former coworkers, people that say, no, he came to work for the first time on such and such a day. Get your employment file, things like that. So you want to prove that you were, in fact, not working, when you're on disability. It's hard to prove a negative. It's hard to prove that you weren't working. Again, they'll see your earnings record, and what could have happened would have been that maybe somebody worked and used your Social Security number, and there's earnings showing up on your earnings record, which you can disclaim. But you're having a hard time getting help. Yeah, no, I mean, again, I don't know what the facts are, but if you're certainly talk to attorneys that that do this type of work, and see if somebody can be of assistance to you if you're looking for somebody local in New Mexico. If an applicant's case is at DDS at the state agency and just starting gathering records, how would moving out of state affect this? A better way to the decision, or just unknown? I think the files transfer pretty easily electronically. So what I would tell you is, if you move out of state, let them know. They will finish up the work at state one. It'll be transferred to state two. And I wouldn't let Social Security prevent you from moving out of state. Okay. Four-Cox has been following me for years. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Oh, Christy. Okay. Okay. There you go. All right. Yeah, 4 o'clock lover 38. Okay. My username came up. Okay. I hear you. Got it. Yeah, okay. You saw the video. I did a little quick video. I put it on Instagram and TikTok. Actually, I'm on TikTok now, believe it or not, where I did a little quick video. And I think I put it on YouTube as well. That basically they're not going to change the grid rules. Everything's going to be sort of the same. Okay. I'm actually broadcasting. I keep looking over here because I'm broadcasting on Instagram. It used to be they had an hour limit for live broadcast, and it's been more than an hour. They haven't cut me off, so I'm thinking maybe they changed it. I don't know. I'm Jess Dwight. I'm 100% P&T veteran for the respiratory issues. Will that speed up my claim? Yeah, if you're 100%, you'll get to the front of the line. That's the positive about being 100%. So usually my 100% VA cases are getting to a hearing within about a year and less than a year and a half. So it could be a year earlier than it would be otherwise. You're north of Dayton. Okay. Actually, I have a cousin who lives in Dayton. I've never been there, not particularly close to him. He's a nice guy. He's just he's my generation, but a lot older than me. But he lives in Dayton, has been there for a long time. I've never been to Dayton. Okay. All right. This is a tough one. Outlaw Nation says, how to get back my SSDI was used to work and proof on disability leave and never returned to work, rather get off oxygen tanks. Um, this may be something that has to go to a hearing. I tell you what I would do. I'd start out, if you haven't already done so, reach out to your U.S. congressperson, your senator, see if they can help a little bit, at least narrow the issues for you. If this is a matter of just, there's clear evidence that you were not working, they may be able to do this and cut through all the red tape. Jenny says, what's the fastest I've seen a claim approved? I've seen claims, and this is more like terminal cancer, within 6 weeks. I think it was the fastest. I've had a couple of terminal cancer cases. Of course, there's never any fee in those, which is fine. I mean, that's just, most lawyers I know would do that if you have a terminal case. 6 weeks, I think, is probably the fastest. And, what I would do is I would write on the application, please evaluate this case as a TERI, which stands for terminal illness, or compassionate allowance, and you cite the section. And then typically I would follow it with a phone call, say, hey, let's look at this. This needs to be approved. And they will sometimes do it. Do I know about Jonas Vonderplanitz? I do not. I can look him up. I'm assuming he's a judge. Assuming it's a he. I don't know. Let's see here. Let's just pop this in and see if we get any results here. A Jonus. You're not coming up there. Let's try Vonder, V-O-N-D. Nope. So I'm not sure what that is. Let's see if let me put it into Google. They got me curious. A-A-J-O. Jonas Vonder. Oh, he's a nutritionist. Okay. Known for the primal diet. Of course, he is dead, so I guess it didn't work so well for him. He was 66-year-old and he died. So, plug that into the old, all right. Higher amounts of proteins, fats, and vegetables. It kind of sounds like an Atkins diet. I mean, there's actually a really interesting book if you're, looking at nutrition and weight loss by this guy, Gary Taubes, Taubes. And he's got a couple of them out there, but one's called Why We Get Fat. And basically what he says is that it's carbs. Carbs is the killer because they turn into sugar. They prevent the triglycerides from being released into your bloodstream to be used as energy. And it just, makes you hungrier. And it causes the insulin response, insulin spike, and then the insulin drop, and it makes you hungry. So he's a big believer in Atkins type of diet, the really high protein, low carb, getting yourself into ketoacidosis. And realize that the high carb diets, and I know people, I have a friend of mine who went on the Atkins diet and he was eating steak, several times a week, eating a lot of fatty, high protein foods. And, his blood work was fine. All that's fine because again, it's carbs is probably really the killer. Crazy, the thing that he complained about most, constipation. He said we didn't have any fiber in his diet. So that was the issue so I would say, I'm not a nutritionist. I do think there's something to be said about a high protein diet. I think fat is unnecessarily vilified. I think that carbs are a big problem. So it looks like this Jonas Vonderplanitz planets was of the same school that high protein, high fat, low carb would be a healthier diet. And it probably is for most people, but you have to do your own research and make your own decision on that. Okay. Wasn't there indigenous iron? Wasn't there a reform bill that would allow people in SSI have $10,000 in the bank account in the name of that bill? I don't. Let's see if we can find something. I'm on it real quick. I can't promise anything. SSI bill. $10,000. They need to change it. Okay, this was called the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act. I'll put that in the comments here. SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act. And it has been brought up in Congress. AARP is behind it, but it has not gone through at this point. Let's see here. This is a couple of years ago, S2767. So I guess that gets brought up. I don't think there's a lot of interest in Congress to do it, quite frankly, but they need to do something because it's really kind of ridiculous. I mean, I think right now it's like $2,000, which is not a whole lot of money in terms of assets that you're allowed. A few days ago, well, that's a form letter. It says they're not severe enough. That's a form letter, so ignore that. Working part-time doesn't necessarily disqualify you. It's a factor, but it's, what your earnings are. So I would look to see, are your earnings below SGA or are they above? If they're above SGA, you can't file. Because Social Security says you're disabled if you cannot perform SGA. If you're performing SGA level work, 1,200 and or was it 12,600? Was that? I always I draw a blank on this all the time. Let's take a look here. Um, 1620. I don't know why I keep coming with 13 something, 1620. All right, so if you're working part-time and you're earning less than $1,620 a month gross, then the part-time work shouldn't disqualify you. If you're earning more than that, again, we're talking $20,000 a year level. But if you're earning less than that, then working part-time should not hurt you. The condition being severe enough just means the medical needs to be stronger. Okay, so Jenny said 28 years. Okay, so I've never seen somebody get approved that fast. So, whatever Jenny's doing, we should all do it because it's working. Okay. All right, let's see if I've got any more here. All right, so we've been at this now for an hour and 20 minutes. I don't have any more questions being posed. Like I said, I think we got a smaller than average crowd tonight just because I think it's Thanksgiving. All right, so if there's no more questions, let's go ahead and end it. We will meet again next week, and hopefully there'll be more people on. Again, I'm always happy to have whoever's on, but again, I have fewer questions I normally have, so I'm going to go ahead and end it. I wish everybody a really wonderful, meaningful Thanksgiving, and let's hope for a good year. Let's hope that some of the really nasty rhetoric that's going on kind of tones down a little bit, and I hope you all have a great, comfortable weekend, long weekend, and be careful about this Black Friday sales. I was looking, and I'll kind of enter on this. I was looking at my feed. There's a couple of sites I have a little news feed that I get. And so it's kind of tracking Black Friday deals and TVs. I don't really watch much TV, but I'm seeing TVs for like $100, 30-inch TVs, flat screen TVs. So right now, I think there's a real glut of TVs in the market. So if you are thinking about getting a TV and you have a few $100s, this is probably not a bad time to do it. And there's just a lot of, what I'm seeing a lot of is TVs. I'm seeing a lot of battery, what do they call them? Battery power packs you would use to charge your phone up. That seems to be real popular. Sound bars, real popular. So, if you're interested in buying stuff for Christmas, there seems to be a lot of deals out there. But just buy stuff you need. Don't buy stuff you don't need. But again, I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you again next week. Y'all take care. Bye bye.